This is internationally best-selling indie author Michael Brent Collings inviting you to join me at bestsellerlife.com/DCR to unlock my tips, tricks, and hacks for a successful writing career. So go to bestsellerlife.com/DCR and kickstart your writing adventure today.
This is Daniel.
And this is Krebs.
This is Alton.
And I am Matai.
And you're listening to Dungeon Crawlers Radio, the greatest geek podcast out there. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers Radio, where we're going to be talking about the galaxy not so far away, but not so long ago. For those of you that have kind of seen the news and things like that, it's kind of percolated some thoughts and some ideas in my head. For those of you that probably do know or don't know, I mean, it's not surprising that I am a huge Star Wars fan. Much like Krebs is a minor fan of the movie Kroll. Yeah, there's a lot of news that's been percolating out there around Star Wars, and some of the backlash that's happened due to series like Andor being one of the most expensive series ever made. And then we have the series,
so.
the Acolyte.
For those who don't know, Daniel's not a huge fan of Andor at all.
No, which is why I was kind of shuffling to the next. Go ahead.
Just moving on. Not trying to yuck anyone's yum or anything like that. No. And for additional record, Alton and I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yes, they do. Which is okay. Which is great. I mean, that is the thing that I like about our group.
Yeah,
we're not all yes guys. We're not all on the same page. But more importantly, when you're out there watching stuff, we don't all have to like the same thing, which is great.
That is correct.
I am not a huge Babylon 5 person either, but Matthew is.
Yeah, Matthew's a huge Babylon 5
which
guy.
is great. But what I've found really interesting with a lot of the stuff, we have like the Acolyte, which came out and it was being praised as this huge, massive thing, and then it hit, and everyone just kind of started tearing it apart. And the gal that was in charge of that is now coming out saying, the reason it failed. At first, it was the fans that she started, early on, she was directing it out. Well, now it's the content creators, people like us, people like
Star Wars Theory and
Star Wars Theories and so forth that talk about the content. Not, and this is the thing that really started percolating this thought, because it's like, well, even the creator of Star Wars Theory is still a fan, and the people that follow him and pay attention to him and listen to him must be fans. And that's the reason why, they have so much, I would say, pull in a way, is because whatever they're saying resonates so much with those individuals that they continue to follow. Because if you were to listen to someone and it didn't resonate with you, you'd probably stop listening. You'd probably say, whoa, this guy or these guys or this gal is off a rocker.
Yeah.
I'm out. I don't think they have as much pull as, they're wanting to blame, because honestly, let's focus on where the blame is. The blame is you guys wrote a crappy story. You weren't paying attention to the IP. You were trying to go on your own woke agenda, and you weren't, paying reverence or homage to the actual source material as it is. Which brings me to my ultimate question here for Krebs is, let's say way back in the early 80s, let's say the first Star Wars film came out. It was, it becomes a success, and George Lucas caves to, Hollywood, and then starts mass producing Star Wars movies. Do you think Star Wars would be as strong and as popular as it is now if he had caved instead of us getting, we only got those 3 movies and then that was it? And then he had that brilliant idea of, okay, we'll release a few books. We got breadcrumbs that fed our appetite, that appeased us, but we weren't oversaturated with content.
That's kind of interesting because I think that we did get a sample of what that would look like when we ended up with the Droids cartoon, the Saturday morning cartoon. We ended up with the 2 Ewok adventures.
Mm-hmm.
And even early days, we had the Star Wars Christmas special and Life Day celebration, right? Every Star Wars spin-off was not nearly as successful as the cinematic trilogy. It should also be noted that while George Lucas was the originator of the ideas, while he was the one who wrote the stories and the characters and all of that, he directed the first film, and the first film is an object lesson. It's the epitome of necessity begets invention, right?
Yeah.
Or innovation, depending on how you look at it. And, I'm trying to make sure I put my thoughts in logical order. Then we make, 3 years later, we get Empire Strikes Back. It's not even directed by George Lucas. It's written by George Lucas. It's produced by George Lucas. It's not directed, right? And then we get to, which actually, if I'm not mistaken, what was it? Empire Strikes Back was Kirshner, right?
Yes.
And then we get to, now I got to look it up because I'm not 100% sure if I've got my sequence correct, but we get to Return of the Jedi, and it's not directed by George Lucas, right? It's directed by, now I got to look it up. Gosh dang it. I used to know this stuff off the top of my head.
Richard Marquand.
Yes, that's right. It's either Marquand or Marquand. I'm not really sure how to pronounce the last name.
Yeah.
Let's say Marquand.
Yeah.
So you had Irving Kershner on Empire Strikes Back, and then you had Marquand on Return of the Jedi as the directors. And if you look at the visual storytelling, A New Hope very much looks like THX 1138, which makes sense because that's his visual style. That was his age at the time. That was his experience. But they also absolutely propelled filmmaking, the science of filmmaking, the art of filmmaking forward. Absolutely. I'm not besmirching that. What I am trying to point out is something that a friend of mine helped me realize, which is George Lucas is a great world builder and he's a great conceptualizer. He is not actually a great storyteller. It takes other people kind of injecting their art to make his stories work. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow for a long time. But look at Mandalorian. Mandalorian is a brilliant combination of other artists' storytelling. And even Andor, even though I know you're not a fan, the story itself is not George Lucas's storytelling. It's just based on his universe, right? And so on, all the way down the line, which actually gets us to the core of our topic. Now, to answer your question before we move on, if George Lucas had caved, I don't know that we would have the same ILM that we have today. I don't know that the art of filmmaking would have been propelled in the same ways ultimately in the end. But I think the reason the original trilogy is strong is because he maintained possession of the IP, but he was wise enough to get other storytellers to help him tell the story.
No, I agree with that part. Yes, concept, world building. He is a master at it. That is something that is definitely true. A lot of the stuff that we know today wouldn't exist without people. I mean, Coruscant did not exist when those 3 movies were made. It came from other creators like Timothy Zahn, Dave Farland, and so on. The list of authors that have contributed book content and material that have expanded the universe beyond what we know on the screen has really helped define what Star Wars is. The biggest difference, though, has been there's been one unified head, individual person that has been guiding that story, which was George Lucas. And then Disney comes and purchases it. And then,
at the time that happened, I was actually very excited because I thought that this would infuse Star Wars with a whole new life.
Yeah.
You know, not change its foundations, not change what it was or, you know, how it started, but just to make it more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the concept we all thought, a lot of us did, because, you know, a lot of us, you know, I mean, you can remember all the times it was like, get George out of there. Get George out of there. George is just, we want more. You know, George is, you know, the lead block that's keeping us from getting more Star Wars content. You know, he sells it, and, you know, it's like selling your prize Ferrari, you know, and then Disney starts saying, yeah, we don't want those tires. You know, we don't want that engine. We don't need those seats either. You know, it's just they started stripping it down.
Yeah.
You know, all this great content that has been built up for years that they could use to create new series, new movies, they just throw out. It's like, yep, it's out of here. Now, I think a lot of this has to do with who they decided to put in charge. Now, I do believe part of that was because of George's own, you know, reference. He's like, yeah, I think Kathleen would be a great person to head this up. I don't think George really knew Kathleen as well as he thought, because in my opinion, she has done more damage to the IP than anything anyone else probably could have done. I mean,
that could be its own episode.
That it could. I mean, it's so bad that even South Park did an entire episode devoted to her.
Yeah, they did.
You know, and it seems like anything that she has touched has not succeeded very well. You know, we have, like you said, The Mandalorian, that came off well, but that's because we have Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, and the team they hand chose. Yeah. You know, and we already know Jon Favreau is a fantastic storyteller just from what he's done with Iron Man and several other great films. Dave Filoni was taught by the master himself. But the difference between Dave Filoni and George Lucas, in my opinion, is Dave was a master storyteller. Mm-hmm. Then he was infused with all the knowledge that George handed over to him.
Yes. And
so it's now we can take, he has the storytelling that George lacked, and now he has the world building and the knowledge of that world and that universe, that galaxy, to be able to make those stories exist and breathe life into them, which is why I think The Mandalorian was so successful when it came out, because this is, and this is my own personal opinion, I really feel like Star Wars succeeds where Star Trek doesn't, because Star Wars, it's the old West where you have some thug sit down in front of you, make a offhanded, you know, remark, and you fire first.
Yeah. That's
why we loved Han Solo. He was like the old gunsmith from the old West. You know, he didn't take crap. He just shot first. And, you know, the Millennium Falcon was his horse of choice. You know, and it was dirty. It was grimy. It was lived in. It wasn't pristine and clean. Which is why I think a lot of people had, with Skeleton Crew, why they had so much difficulty with those first two episodes, because it was so clean and crisp, and it was very similar to Star Trek. It doesn't feel lived in. It feels, at least for me, very sterile when I watch Star Trek. And so I think that's why Star Wars feels so amazing, because, you know, you see that tagline, you know, in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and you see the dirt and the grime on the walls. You're like, yeah, this place has been lived in for a while. And, you know, and then we get 7, 8, and 9. You know, 1, 2, and 3, you can love them or hate them for all you want. George did kind of pander to the audience.
Episodes 1, 2, and 3 are the concrete evidence that George Lucas is not a good storyteller.
That is true. There is some good story there. There's a lot of missed moments. There's a lot of deleted scenes that are like, why didn't that get put in there? You know, we have episode 2, which is the start of the Clone Wars. And we have 3, which is the end. And you're just kind of left like, what the heck happened? Like, there's so much that's happened in there. Yeah. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't get why Anakin fell. That's just weird, because his wife is going to die. But if you go watch the 7 seasons of the Clone Wars, you get a little bit more depth to Anakin's character. I mean, he was a general in a galactic battle. He suffers from PTSD. He suffers from a lot of loss and pain. And not only that, one thing that is very different with Anakin than from the other Jedi, the Jedi saw the clone troopers as collateral damage, as just, yeah, who cares? They can die. We'll make new ones. Anakin saw each of them as individual people, and he felt the loss of each one of those, and he hated losing them. And it was like losing a family member. And so, and they did die quite a bit. I mean, let's face it.
Quite a bit. They died a lot.
Yeah. And so we saw how badly he reacted to the death of his mother in, episode 2. Now compound that. Each brother in arms dying. If that was, he slated a whole tribe of sand people for one person, how much anger, how much resentment is he carrying when he's seen hundreds of his fellow brothers die at the hands? Now there is a lot of, plus we have Palpatine manipulating him the whole 7 years and so on and so forth. And he's hiding his relationship with Padme. If we add in the deleted scene from Obi-Wan that they cut out, Obi-Wan does know. And he knows that Anakin knows, but they play this weird game because, of pretending they don't know, because Padme makes Anakin happy, and ultimately that's all Obi-Wan wants, which I think would have been perfect to leave that in, because that would have explained so much.
Yeah.
But yes, the dialogue was horrible and hokey. Here is in episode 2, we have Padme that's saying, "I don't want you, Anakin," but she, we can't be together. But she is in the most scintillating, attractive gown that shows off almost every part of her body while saying, "No, don't come near me. We can't be together." Like, some of the choices, and
But all that is to say that, like, one of the joys of the Star Wars universe, though, and it's one of the reasons I actually love Kroll as much as I do, is that it has opened the door to so many other story hooks and so many opportunities to tell tales and to, like, sort of unlock imaginations. And in fact, actually, one of our good friends, from way back in the day, DCR style, and also for a time a co-host here on the show, Jared Seach, he got his start making fan films, Star Wars fan films that were award winning. Like, he did a fantastic job making these films from his love of Star Wars.
And in fact, Dave Filoni even handed the award to him. Like,
yes,
he has met the master.
Yeah. And so I appreciate Star Wars. I appreciate, we're huge fans. We still love it for all of its, imperfections, for all of its faults, foibles, and beauty and grace and all those things. But not even, but it's more like there are so many storytellers out there who do an amazing job of paying homage to a galaxy far, far away. And so we have all of this really cool fan created material, thanks to the birth of YouTube. From the very start of YouTube up until present day, people have been making fan films for Star Wars.
Yes.
And the technology, the ability, the software, all of it has only gotten better with time. You opened this episode asking if he had gone with Hollywood, what would the world have looked like after that? And the truth is, like, and then I jumped on the whole, well, George Lucas is not a good storyteller.
Yeah.
In 1997, when he released the special edition of Star Wars, and he added in all these special effects, I remember being so excited because, like, oh my gosh, we're updating Star Wars, but we're keeping Star Wars, and we're getting some new stuff, and it was all a buzz. And then, you know, I was in theaters and I was recognizing all the new things, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is I see that this is new and that's new, and then Mos Eisley is bigger and these creatures are now in existence, and at the time it fed a need that nothing else could, right?
Yeah.
But then you look back on it and it's like, okay, were those additions necessary? Did they actually do anything good? I think in A New Hope, the additions of the special edition weren't necessarily bad or detracting, and they kind of helped flesh out the world a little bit more. I think that they made the space battles more epic. I think that they made certain explosions look better, you know, things like that maybe. And then we get to Empire Strikes Back, and there aren't as many add-ons, but the Wampa looks a little bit more contemporary, and that looks a little bit more believable, and, you know, things of that nature. We go on from there. Then we get to Return of the Jedi, and it's like, why are we adding stuff anymore? Like, why did we change everything to Jedi Rock, which is like a way worse song than what we had originally from Sice Noodles, right?
Yeah.
And why there were a couple of pickup shots they wanted to get with Ula the dancer, and so they got the original actress back, but she's older now, but she still did a really good job, and you know, they just want to drop her in the pit and get like a better reaction and all these other things. And it's like, are we really enhancing what we had before, or are we just throwing stuff at it? Then the Blu-rays come out. The Blu-rays come out with the prequels and the original trilogy, and he's added more stuff to it again. He's made more changes. And having done the prequels, he injects in Return of the Jedi one of the biggest mistakes, I think, that he possibly could have made, which was to make Vader speak when Vader is making the difficult decision between saving his son and following the Emperor, his master. He puts it there. He gets James Earl Jones to come back and voice the whole no, and then he like goes in, and it's like, you have absolutely ruined that moment. That moment was so much better without that quote unquote enhancement, right? He adds Sebulba very poorly to Jabba's palace so that he can tie it into, so that he can like give validation and value to the Phantom Menace, right? Like he can justify it,
yeah,
and all these things. And looking back on, and then like you pointed out, the beak and the Sarlacc. It's like no, the Sarlacc being a giant hole in the ground that is just like a vortex of teeth.
Yeah,
that was, and you know, you fall into the Sarlacc. That was enough. And it had tentacles that would come out and grab you and pull you in. That was enough.
Yeah.
That was okay. And that actually worked really, really well. But then to like give it a beak, and then it's like, oh, I'm going to come out and bite you now. And, you know, like none of that. And then it makes it harder for Boba Fett to escape later anyway, when we get into expanded universe details and so on and so on. Looking at all this stuff, like every time George Lucas did this stuff, people were like, why did you do this? Why did you make Ewoks blink? Why did you add a beak to the Sarlacc? Why did, you know? And then he's like, well, these are all the things that I really wanted to do back in 1977 and 80 and 83. And I just wasn't able to do it at the time because of limitations of budget and technology. You know, that he says this all the time, and he's like, well, I always wanted to do it that way. And it's like, but that's the worst way. Like the way that you did it the first time was actually better because you had natural obstacles in your way. You had natural obstacles in your way to prevent you from making terrible mistakes. And now that you have a ton of money and no one's telling you no, and you're just allowed to do whatever you want, you have made all of these changes. And then on top of that, to then tell the fan base that they're wrong for wanting the originals back. Like, well, this is, you know, this movie isn't their movie. This movie's my movie. And this is the story I wanted to tell. And it's like, oh, okay. So you wanted to tell a bad story then. You wanted to tell a lesser version. Got it. Maybe don't do that. Maybe stick with like original greatness. Maybe acknowledge that the fates came together to get you to create something no one else could have, that at a time when it couldn't have been done any other way. Like the absolute miracle of the series of events that took place to bring Star Wars to the screen in the first place. allowed it saved George Lucas from himself. If what he is saying is true, that this is the way he always wanted to tell the story, that this is what he always wanted to have, then all of the surrounding variables saved him from himself. And then when those were removed, when those obstacles were gone, he went back and damaged it. And then triples down on it, saying that his version is the correct version and we just all have to live with it. So all that is to say that, like, going back to your original question of, like, if he had capitulated early on, you know, would we have had a more full universe? Would we have had, I think we would have had more Star Wars content, but I don't think we would have the Star Wars identity that we have today. You know, I think that there was enough blocking Hollywood. Actually, Hollywood kind of blocked itself on that one, and enough blocking George Lucas that it kind of put them between these invisible guide rails to help create something, you know, that was incredible and could not have been replicated in any other environment. It was a once in a planet's lifetime experience, and we all appreciate and love it for what it is. And I kind of wish people would stop trying to change what was.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I'll add to this and want to put in this is, you know, Disney originally purchased Star Wars to attract male viewers and boy viewers to their brand, their name. You know, for years, Disney has been prominent with girls and women because of their princesses. So they went out, they acquired Marvel, they acquired Star Wars to bring in those male viewers, whether they're boys or men. And then the person in charge purposely goes after destroying that. You know, that's where I think it's gone wrong. You know, where Kathleen Kennedy and her directors have come out with, you know, shirts saying the Force is female. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are plenty of amazing women and girls out there that love Star Wars.
Sure.
Rightfully so. There are amazing, strong female characters. Mara Jade, Princess Leia, Queen Amidala, Padme herself, not as a queen. And the list goes on. I mean, Mon Mothma, we can pull out a bunch of different names, whether in the films, in the TV series, or even in the books or comics of strong female characters, which has always been such an amazing thing in my mind for the Star Wars universe. Is it's not just about focusing on the male perspective, the female perspective. You know, there's aliens. There's all different types of things. I mean, there's no racial prejudice, you know, like we see in our world today, or in the past. And that's something that I always found amazing and exciting is, you know, even though we had all these different races living in this galaxy, they got along. You know, sometimes they argued, sometimes they fought, sometimes they wanted to steal your drink or whatever, and you had to chop off an arm or a tentacle. But everyone still kind of coexisted, which was amazing and fantastical all at the same time. And you had strong female characters. And so growing up, I never really had this distinction of, you know, men were better than women because of films like Star Wars and stuff like that. And I think that is a legacy that it still has and it still contributes. And so to come out and say, well, no, you know, we're only going to do female things. We're going to make men uncomfortable, I think is the wrong aspect to go. And the point is to keep to the story. The story is what's going to connect with the people, and the people will connect with the characters they're meant to connect with.
Yeah.
You know, I never was a big, you know, Princess Leia fan until Return of the Jedi. And I'm sure almost every boy was at that point when they saw her at Jabba's palace. You know, but even then, you know, I think Carrie Fisher's statement about that, because I know there's been a lot of complaint about the metal bikini, and you know they changed the name of Hutt Slayer costume and blah blah blah, and She was at a convention, and one guy asked her the question, "How do you feel about, having to wear that metal bikini?" And she's like, "You want to know what? I'm so sick and tired of people asking me this question. I'll tell you how I felt about it. I was so irritated with being put in that thing that I turned around and I strangled the sucker that put me in it." And she made it not sound she made it sound empowering instead of disempowering.
Yeah.
And I liked that because, yes, it was a creative choice. But I mean, even in episode 1, if you see when Jabba appears for the pod race, there's one of his slaves in that same type of outfit. So it's just his kink. But I like how that she turned that around. Instead of being a negative, it was a positive. And I think that's how we should look at things, instead of like looking at everything from this negative lens of disempowerment, and realizing that Star Wars brings a lot of empowerment to characters. Luke was a farm boy that always gazed off into the distance, wanting more, and found it. Mm-hmm. And not only that, he redeemed this horrible, dark being of the galaxy back into the light that no one else could. And Leia was this strong-willed, princess and senator that was able to bring the rebellion and help destroy the Death Star along with her brother. Well, we didn't know he was her brother at the time. There was a weird, awkward kiss in Empire, but that's okay. She tames a wild stallion that is Han Solo. There's a lot of greatness in these characters that I think you're right will transcend the time and space. Who knows? 100 years from now, they'll be talking about it just like Mary Shelley's books. There are just some films that will last the test of time, and I think those 3 will. 7, 8, 9, I don't think so. I don't think they will, but I do believe 4, 5, and 6 will. 1, 2, and 3 might. They're on the cusp of maybe, but I definitely believe 4, 5, and 6 will. They have everything that you need to show great storytelling and world building and so forth. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now. I just think what Disney needs to do if they want to move forward is look at those 4 films. What worked? What didn't? And then look at 7, 8, and 9 and say, what worked? What didn't? Throw out most of it because most of it didn't work. And start building on that, because Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, we haven't seen the Grogu and Mandalorian movie yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to hit all the cylinders. It's going to hit all the points to make it a good film. I mean, even watching the trailer, I'm like, okay. But moving back to 7, 8, and 9, I missed the one point that I really didn't like is and it's one of the things that just really bugged me with Andor. In all of the Star Wars stuff, they've had their own slang for swearing.
Yeah.
Star Wars had. Andor, 7, 8, and 9 brought in what we deem as swearing. Those words entered into the Star Wars universe, and that hit me like nails on a chalkboard. And then there were, normal terms that we use that were never used before that entered into those scripts. And again, those were nails on chalkboard to me. And it just was so frustrating because that's one of the things that I liked. We also lost some really powerful character arcs, where Finn's driving into that battering ram, sacrificing himself, which would have been an amazing moment that could have rallied the troops, kind of like what we saw with Coulson in Avengers. But no, Rose hits him and then gives off some silly story of, well, I love you, idiot. Come on, that would have been a glorious end to a character.
Right.
And then of course, I could just tear apart 8. Then the weird bombers at the beginning that move super slow, that are getting destroyed. There's no weight in space. Why are they moving so slow? I mean, it's because they're so heavy. Okay, maybe they have some crappy propulsion units. That would make more sense. But no, there's no weight in space. Yeah, That whole scene drives me nuts. Anyways, all right. This has gone very long. We could probably split this into 2 episodes if we needed to. But I think we've hit the point that to say if George had caved to Hollywood, we probably would not be talking about Star Wars today. It would have come, it would have gone. You know, it would have burned brightly and dissipated into the universe, much like Brave Star, the cartoon did, or Silver Wings, or Mask. These cartoons that were popular for a while and then faded into existence. And, you know, something else would have replaced them. It was because we got a few breadcrumbs, even if they were crappy, that kept our passion and love for this iconic trilogy when it originally came out alive. And then when we got other stuff, it helped it, but it just didn't do it as well. So it is something that needs to be handled with care, but at the same time, we do need something. We need something that is on with the IP, that is created by content creators that love this this universe, this galaxy, this story. And there are hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of these individuals out there that have made fan content in the past, that are still making fan content, that do love this universe. And I think if Disney were smart, they would start looking at those people to help write. They would continue to pick and choose people that know this universe, like Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, Bryce Dallas Howard. I can't even remember the rest of them that were on The Mandalorian.
Yeah, so many, including Taika Waititi.
Yeah. Except for with Taika, I think he needs to have some reins on him. He
That's
needs.
funny because I thought the worst episodes were actually done by Bryce Dallas Howard.
I mean, but she developed. I mean, hers kept getting better.
That's true. Hers did improve with time.
Yeah. So, and I think with him, I mean, he goes really over the top. So I think he needs that overarching head to go, no, we need to bring it down. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. He makes great films.
Yes.
But sometimes he needs to be brought down to a little bit of reality with some stuff. But a great storyteller. And I think that's the overall thing. I think if anything we come away with Star Wars, with this episode today, is that Star Wars needs a unified head, someone sitting over the top that is looking down on all the stories happening and making sure they're all cohesive, they're all flowing together, so that at the end of the day, if we do a movie trilogy, 7, 8, and 9, that they all are congruent and connect together, and they don't contradict each other like 8 and 9 do. Yeah. And 7.
Yeah. One unified head that is not George Lucas.
Yeah. I mean, George was great. Don't get me wrong. George was great the time he was there. I'm glad he has moved forward. But I do believe that someone else needs to take the reins that loves this IP as much as he did. And, you know, he made choices, whether we see them as good or bad. He made choices and they were a unified choice. Mm-hmm. You know, so that is the one thing I can give to him, is when he said no, it was no. And it was no across the board. And he held firm to that. It wasn't no, and then the committee of Disney or Hollywood's like, and, you know, and then he caves. Yeah. So I think we need someone like that says, no, this doesn't exist in Star Wars. We can't have this. Well, you know, I don't care if this is the agenda you're going on. It doesn't fit. We're not putting it in there. And that's what we need now. You know, and it's diverse enough that we can have a lot of different things in there. Don't get me wrong. But there are some things like modern English swearing that doesn't belong in Star Wars. You know, that's like watching Farscape, where they've always said frail the whole time. Mm-hmm. And then we get to the final season, they're dropping the F-bomb. It's like, what the crap? Like, this doesn't fit because that's not what's there. So even though they could have got away with it because, you know, John Crichton was from Earth. He could have said that, but no, he adapted and started saying frail and all those other slang words. It just didn't work. So anyways, I'm just going to circle and circle on a toilet bowl tangent. So I'm going to bail out.
Toilet bowl tangent, new favorite term.
That's my new term. Anyways, folks. So thanks for going on this journey with us, even though it's gone a little bit longer than we anticipated. But with that said, we'll catch you next time.
First of all, in the absence of Matthew, let your geek flag fly. So say we all. And Alton, if he were here, he would say, and dungeon crawlers, tell your story, whatever may come. And whether you absolutely agree with us that Star Wars is better off without George Lucas at the helm, or whether you're a diehard for everything George Lucas has touched, always remember to be epic and don't suck.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
What happens when modern magic, high-tech weaponry, and an unstoppable dragon collide? Find out in the epic audiobook of A Dragon's Fate, brought to life by Daniel and Krebs. This Whitney Award finalist novel will pull you into a pulse-pounding world where a secret cabal battles for power, and a dragon could bring everything to an explosive end. Don't just hear the story. Feel the magic, the danger, and the action. Get ready for a ride you won't forget. Grab your copy of A Dragon's Fate, now available on Audible.